All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel discussion on the evolving landscape of global manufacturing for electrification across industrial machinery. My name is Paul Drabble, Global Marketing Director with Delta Q Technologies, which is a member of the Zaffi Group. Before I make introductions, if you have any questions during the panel discussion, please add them to the Q&A tab to the top right of your webinar screen. And note that your questions will be sent privately. I'll be managing the session behind the scenes and will chime back in at the end to facilitate a brief Q&A, answering audience questions in the order that they are received. With that said, it's now my pleasure to introduce the moderator and panelists for this session. Joining us today, we have Sergey Merga, who is a key account manager at IMS Gear, and he brings his insights into manufacturing challenges and technological advancements. Olympia Bertarini is the Global Purchasing Director at Zaffi Group, and she'll share her expertise on supply chain strategy and the transition to sustainable electromotive technologies. Davey Karkarson is an attorney with Transnational Matters PLLC, and he'll provide valuable perspectives on navigating regulatory and compliance challenges in a complex global environment. And finally, our panel moderator, David Niemanen, is the purchasing manager at InMotion Technologies, and he will guide the conversation and share the trends he is seeing across clients navigating the transition toward electrification. So with that, I'll hand over to David.
Well, thank you, Paul. I really want to say a big thank you to our panelists, everyone tuning into the session as well. You know, anyone who's endured the last 4 years in manufacturing can attest to the fact that we are indeed living in those proverbial, let's say, interesting times. Sustainability and specifically electrification, they continue to gain traction in the mainstream. And so manufacturers are facing increased pressure to innovate while balancing cost, quality, and speed to market. So like Paul mentioned, we're going to be exploring some key electrification challenges and opportunities as well, including the shift away from fossil fuels, the role of automation in scaling production, and the impact of evolving regulations. We've got a ton to cover, so let's dive in. I'd like to start by asking you, Olympia, how would you describe the current state of global manufacturing for electrification?
As you mentioned, David, we are everywhere in the world at a crucial transition point because we are witnessing a significant transition from traditional manufacturing processes that rely mainly on fossil fuels to more modern, sustainable electromotive technology, which brings significant benefits in the world. You asked me to describe the current state of global manufacturing for electrification, and in my opinion, there are two major trends. One is advanced technology, which really are driven by strong investment, mainly done by key global players in the world. And as investment, I consider all assets such as R&D, production capacity, machinery, and so on. The second trend is increasing volume in electrification. Those volume are even reaching two-digit growth rate year on year. Those two trends, so advanced technologies and increasing volume, are making and supporting the transition, making it more feasible and enable adoption of cost-effective solutions. On the other hand, the speed of those changes in global manufacturing for electrification is negatively affected by complexity that is increasing and also uncertainty that is coming from external factors such as international trade policies, regulator, and compliance matters.
Yeah, I mean, those are huge challenges. Sergey, I direct the next question to you because I wonder from your perspective, what do you think are the biggest challenges then that manufacturers are facing?
Yeah, thank you for the question, David. Talking about challenges, there is no shortage of them. Although challenges should always be seen as opportunities. But one of the biggest challenges of our time is the implementation of the circular economy dimension. Like you know, the classic triangle of price, quality, and time has been expanded to include criteria such as resilience, innovation, and sustainability, and customers are demanding this accordingly. It is clear that not only legislative requirements, but also specific customer requirements now represent a challenge. Not the complete electrification of manufacturing processes, but also powered by 100% green energy at all locations worldwide. In the meantime, sustainability is often explicit procurement requirement from the customer, like renewable energy, carbon footprint reduction, circular economic practices, etc. So the business case for sustainability is clear, and the executives are demanding is they see it as also as a big opportunity. They integrate sustainability into the core of companies, prepare strategy, and also in the operations. Of course, otherwise no one will invest into your company, and it will be hard to find customers, and also to attract talents in the near future too. So we need to understand electrification as a part of a larger transformation towards more sustainable society. Furthermore, of course, aspects like labor shortage. The labor shortage is hampering production capacity and forcing companies to push ahead with automation and efficiency improvements. Aspects like retention, aging workforce, skills gap, for example. Technological advances require specialized skilled workers who are, simply said, often not available in sufficient numbers, which leads to bottlenecks. And of course, a very important point is the pressure to innovate. The electrification industry is experiencing massive growth driven by regulatory requirements, climate change, and technological advancements. While some markets are evolving rapidly, for example, Europe often exhibits a kind of more hesitant approach. Manufacturers are under constant pressure to implement new technologies and processes in order to remain competitive. Increasing customer requirements, shorter product life cycles, and the shift towards sustainable production methods are forcing companies to continuously invest in research, development, and also in automation. So you have, at the same time, they have to master the balancing act between innovation, cost control, and scalability. On the other hand, digitalization and now AI, artificial intelligence, have triggered a trend shift that will have a fundamental impact on supply chains. A far-reaching idea space that emerged and we just began to understand. As a result, the requirements for cybersecurity, for example, are also increasing. Risk mitigation is becoming more important. As this aspect ultimately becomes a competitive factor. Information security is not just an interface to the customer, but a commitment to the customer. On the other hand, of course, there is the aspect that more and more automation of manufacturing processes is required in order to be competitive. Every manual intervention in the process is reflected in the cost as well, especially if it's not carried out in low-wage countries. Linked to this is the aspect of automation safety. The more automation, the higher the requirements for work safety. Meanwhile, automation without the use of artificial intelligence is also unimaginable. For example, at IMS Gear, we have already equipped all end-of-line test benches with AI as a standard. Generally speaking, furthermore, the pace of time to market. We are witnessing a global shift. China has caught up in many areas or even surpassed others. And geopolitical tensions as well as economic shifts are significantly impacting the industry. Companies must act faster to remain competitive. This is also, of course, a pressure that is increasing from the customers as well. Also, the pressure to provide a solution quickly, the pressure to provide initial mock-ups based on clear specifications, the demands on time to market are therefore increasing significantly. This calls for very close cooperation with our customers and further partnerships. This is extremely important here to minimize the delivery time, ideally to less than a week. So this is where approaches such as fast prototyping enter the game. So some thoughts on this from my side.
Yeah, so Sergey, that's a really detailed answer, and I appreciate all the insight from your side, particularly specific examples with what you're seeing at IMS Gear. So I wonder, Olympia, working in supply chain sort of globally as you do you agree with what Sergey is saying? Are you seeing these same, let's say, technologies that are being implemented to drive efficiency, scalability, resilience, so on? What do you see from your perspective?
First of all, I thank you, Sergey, for bringing the voice of SAP Group supplier to our panel. I fully
honor.
agree with what you said, Sergey, and your intervention make me thinking about the importance of a strong partnership and a strong connection, and also the sharing of values with our supplier and partners. And this is one of the major ZAPI Group pillar in the field of procurement and sourcing strategies. In fact, we are aware that our supplier play really a key role in bringing their advancement in the electrification industry together with us. And in particular, suppliers can support ZAPI Group since design phase and really contribute to the choice of the most efficient and scalable solution and design for manufacturing. Don't forget that at the present, the transition to electrification is involving a wide range of industrial application and customer at the same time. And the more we have successfully established partnership with supplier, the more we release innovative solution and sustainable solution to the market.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Olympia. And, listening to your answer, and it reminds me of how we kind of have worked all these years trying to build global partnerships. I mean, I'm sitting here in the United States. Sergey is one of our suppliers sitting in Germany. We have suppliers throughout Europe and Asia and so on. And so I'd like to shift gears for just a minute, because that kind of global supply chain raises a ton of concerns. And I keep hearing about these kind of like changes regarding regulations globally, the way international trade is being regulated specifically, tariffs, these types of things. So Davey, let's bring you into the conversation. How are you advising clients who are navigating these, what I think are very complicated and varying regulatory environments across different borders and across different sectors?
Well, thank you, David, for giving me the time to explain about these issues, about the trade tariffs, international trade issues, and all the global dynamics we're going through right now today. This has been going on since, I think I would say, a lot of people tell me actually it's been going on recently. I said, no, it's been going on since actually COVID. We actually, even before, right, we had a lot of changes over time. And we live in a global dynamic environment where changes is very dynamic. And the first thing I can tell for everyone is adaptation. We need to adapt very fast. And the people who don't adapt to these changes are the ones who are going to be left behind. So that's the first step that we need to be worried about. Now, in terms of manufacturing and import and export international trade, basically the first step that everybody needs to look at is the political environment between the host countries, where the goods are coming from where they're coming from to where they're going to. And I want to give an example, and that's kind of extravagant example, a little bit. For example, you're surely not going to manufacture your goods in North Korea and ship them in the United States. Those are they're not going to trade it with each other, right? And so it's very imperative to understand the political environment in the global landscape of where we're coming from and where we're going to. The second step that we need to take a look at is the free trade agreements. A lot of people heard about the USMCA. Trump is actually trying to negotiate with Canada, trying to negotiate with Mexico. Before it was NAFTA, and now it's USMCA, and then now we're trying to renegotiate. I just want to say a little point about the USMCA. Canada tried to opt out of arbitration in the USMCA, so I can understand how this was a little bit uneven when we entered into that treaty, but that's another panel discussion about this matter. Because and I'll explain to you how arbitration plays a big role in the global landscape later on. The third step is once you oversee the treaties, are how the political environment plays out in the global dynamic of international trade. Then now you need to know, well, what type of product I'm importing. Is this very regulated in the US? For example, alcohol, right? It's regulated, you need a license. Do you need some sort of licensing agreement with the agencies in the United States prior that you enter into the market of the country where you're importing? And then the last step, of course, is contracts. So in the United States, we follow what's called the UCC Article 2, or the Uniform Commercial Code of Article 2, or internationally, what all countries actually revolve around is the United Nations Convention on Contracts for International Sales of Goods, which actually provides a global guidance on the treaties when they actually interact with each other in international trade. What is CISG? Well, EMs to standardize the rules of contract partnership, makes it simpler for everybody, makes it more uniform. It even applies automatically to the international sale of contract between parties. And the convention clearly delineates the responsibility of buyers and sellers, including when the risk of loss transfers from the seller to the buyer. It provides a mechanism addressing the breaches of contract. So overall, it is very, very difficult to kind of put it in a simple answer. It could be very, very complex, but yet there's a way to kind of navigate the water of international trade when we are in global dynamic changes. And that's to adapt very quickly and to study also the environment beforehand and during the market. There's one more thing that I want to point out that's very important to your contracts and also to the regulatory purposes as well, is that a lot of people are oversee the need for agility. And what I mean by this is that when you enter into contracts with a manufacturer, a lot of you knows about this, you have a purchase order, right? The purchase order is the first document you send out. It said, manufacturer, this is exactly the items of goods that I need. There's also the Incoterms on a purchase orders, there's a quantity, there's the price. And there's also the bill of lading that's going to follow up later on. But not now. It's just actually telling you this is my offer. I'm coming there, this is my offer. And then the manufacturer, most of the time, they provide a pro forma invoice confirming the offer. We call that the battle of the form under UCC Article 2 when two merchants enter a contractual agreement. And that's a binding contract when those two forms don't contradict each other. Anyways, one of the major issues that we overlook is that there's no force majeure. Well, let's think about tariff for 1 second, right? If the price of tariffs has been increased from 10 to 25%, but you bought the goods at the time the tariff was very low, and now tariffs are very high. Now there's a problem pricing because when you import the goods, you're going to lose a lot more money. There's a problem. You got to make these a lot less, so you got to lose completely. So when this happens, there's a clause called force majeure. In the force majeure, consider also economic changes in the global dynamic landscape. Right. So that force majeure is not only an act of God, but it's also as well a way to kind of exit out of contract in case if things are out of control. At the point it can put you bankrupt. So that's something that a lot of people do not put in the contract. or an escalator clause. An escalator clause is actually something that also a lot of the manufacturers and the buyers don't put into their contract. The escalator clause allows for the price to fluctuate and say, okay, but just to let you know, the price may not be certain at the time. It can always change over time. There's also another problem. When the goods arrive in the United States, I'm particularly speaking of the United States, they get stopped by CBP. And they get seized over there most of the time. And if something goes wrong and we're not cleared on time, then you have damages and you have storage fees. So these fees need to be taken into account because now you're saying, okay, but the tariff went up. I can cover the clearance because I was based on a 10% tariff, not a 25% tariff. I'm saying those are real tariff right now. Those are not implemented, but that's exactly what could happen. So that is something to consider when we're dealing with international trade and import-export seizures at International Trade Court, New York. And then one more thing we also that's been overlooked a lot of time with buyer and seller is the Incoterm. So the Incoterm, most of the time people use FOB, free on board. Well, what does it mean, FOB? A lot of people just tell me, or not logistics, they tell me, oh, FOB. Yeah, that's exactly what we use, FOB, standardized. Well, free on board means actually the transfer of liability from the seller changes or transfer to the buyer at the time where it arrives at the port, where in the location. So that's very important. Why? Because what if the ship actually sink in the middle of the water? Who's responsible? Or what actually it's so important to understand the Incoterms that you're putting into the contract that the liability is when it tells you when the liability transfers. Um, and then one more thing, the last thing that actually is something that's way overlooked in international trade, it's disputes, cross-border disputes. One thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people say, okay, yeah, we do these transactions, but what if the goods are non-conforming? What if the goods is defective? What if the goods is not arriving on time? Then you have a breach of $1 million contract, and then you lost the clients, or you have a lot of problems about how to mitigate your damages. Well, the problem is that we're dealing with a global dynamic landscape, and the issue is how do you streamline these issues? How can you make it avoiding these disputes? Or if there is a dispute, how can you just go back, right? So let's say party A orders from party B in country in Uzbekistan, and then party C from India and party D from another country. And what's happening here is that all party breaches a contract. Now you have 3 lawsuits and 4 lawsuits with different countries. It's all spread out along the map. So what I do, usually speaking of my contract, I always implement an international arbitration clause. The one and the most tribunal that's more knowledgeable in international trade, it's the International Chamber of Commerce in Paris. I absolutely love their expertise. They exactly are the ones who actually created the Incoterms. They came from it. So, and the reason why we love international arbitration for this issue is because it streamlines your disputes. One, you don't have to hire many law firms to deal with actually those disputes. Two, there's only one procedure you go for. You don't have a culturalism issues with the fights, what you're going to deal with most of the time. And also as well, it's like when it's confidential. You don't need to be in the docket out loud and be like, okay, this guy sues this guy, and now it's all Google. And when you Google the company, you are all over the place. So you might as well be in arbitral proceedings where you protect your company's reputation and just be in a docket somewhere. And then all of a sudden, when we Google the company, we can find you, right? So those are things of consideration that's not being implemented with a lot of buyers sellers. And these fees are what could cost them a lot less in the legal fees and could also save them from headache, tons of headache down the line. Overall, based on all of what I'll conclude right now, is that it's important for all supply chain in terms of buyer or seller that they need to be very adaptive The technology is moving forward. We have AI today. We have a lot of communications. Back then, like I'm talking about 1950s, it was by mail. We did it on email. Today, we can call the manufacturer, or we can go on Alibaba and order. I mean, it's starting to be more connected, and adaptation is the first thing to do. And the second thing to do is to make sure you understand the legal implications about importing certain goods and how to go about it safely to avoid any issues down the line.
Yeah, David, thanks for that really detailed reply. And I'm going to go off script for just a second and put out into the chat a link to an article that you posted on your site. And I hope you don't mind that I do that, but transnationalmatters.com, a really great article that you wrote that I think, in a panel like this, it's hard to get our minds wrapped around such a complicated issue. And I think there was a lot of insight in that article. So for those joining in the audience, I think that's a great resource if you want to go there to learn a little bit more. So David, thanks for that. Olympia, I want to go back to you now for just a moment, because clearly from the answer that we just heard Davey give, that's incredibly complicated environment that we're living with, and it's quickly changing. I know in the US we're suddenly under the threat of new tariffs and counter tariffs and renegotiated trade agreements and so on. So Olympia, does this change your mind at all? I mean, how do you balance the risks and benefits of keeping this kind of global supply chain versus the sort of knee-jerk reaction to say, let's just go local, let's do all local production, local suppliers, and so on? I mean, can we continue to have this global supply chain approach?
Yeah, having in front such risk and the big complexity that David described us, for sure, you are attempting to localize everything, but that's not the right answer or the right reaction in the business. So globalization has been quite a popular trend for years, and also in the strategy, in the procurement organization strategy, we were taking in serious consideration globalization since decades, and mainly driven by the cost effectiveness. But today, yes, in the recent years, we faced unexpected and unpredictable events which abruptly highlighted the vulnerability of only trusting on global supply chain. So we have been taught to think about also resiliency. So not only cost target to cost efficiency, but taking into consideration resiliency and risk monitoring. So many organizations, including ourselves, looked to relocate some sourcing in the domestic country or in the nearby countries. But to better answer to your question, David, that on how we can balance the benefits of local sourcing with the efficiency of global sourcing, my recipe is the following. First of all, you have to draw up a strategy targeting both to efficiency and resiliency. Secondarily, you have to prepare your strategy at the level of a single commodity. You cannot, generally speaking, about a procurement strategy that might be applied on everything, all your components, or your products. So you have to dig into your commodity management analysis and define the strategy by commodity, because it might be that each commodity you define a different strategy. Last but not least, you should be agile, because the environment might change, and also we are now looking with high focus on what US implication will be in our business, and in our sourcing. And so you have to be agile and change the strategy and adapt the strategy. Adaption is also has been a word that also Dave used, so I will copy his word because it's really sweet. Also, the topic of sourcing strategy, and because no more strategies are written in the stone. A last comment from my side is that in my experience, I valued a lot to have a global footprint, to trust on a global organization as Zappi Group having multiple facility, multiple footprint covering all region of the world, because it can really make the difference and help you to better to have a better governance on all your global supply chain. Because if you have a facility in China, your Chinese suppliers will be domestic for you. You will arrange meetings face to face. You will know the regulation. You will have the same culture. So being sitting in Europe and trusting on a local facility and purchasing office in China, the same valid for US everywhere, you will really you can have a better governance. You can reduce barrier, and you can anticipate information and news related to that company, that country, that being far away, despite technology will help you so much to remove barriers, is a different topic.
Well, look, I genuinely appreciate that insight, Olympia, and really from all the panelists. And it's funny to think about a 1 hour session making some kind of closing statement at the halfway point. But this is a topic that has so much. I think we could probably all discuss it for the next 2 hours or something if we wanted. But in the interest of time, I've got a closing question that I want to direct to all three of the panelists separately. Okay, so you're each coming to this discussion from a different background. Sergey in business development, Olympia with global supply chain management, David from more of the legal and regulatory environment. So I'm going to direct this individually, a slightly different question to each of you, but basically the same idea. So we'll start with Sergey. Someone working in business development, you're a key electrification supplier. Where do you think companies should be placing their focus in the next 5 to 10 years?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, David. Of course, first of all, the aspect of enhanced agility. You have to focus on rapid decision making and adaptability, which are crucial to keeping pace with global developments. Like I said, especially Western, especially European companies tend to spend too long to discussing developments while other markets are moving at a rapid pace. We need to regain that kind of momentum, especially in purchasing and rapid solution finding. So the recipe, like Olympia said, from business development point of view, just do it, try it, test it, and adapt it if necessary. Of course, this requires some flexibility, especially on the part of our customers, to bring the final solution to the finish line. This point includes also rapid prototyping, efficient supplier qualification, and smooth volume production with global quality assurance that are critical to remain competitive. Rapid prototyping capabilities are needed to drive an accelerate the value creation process. Also, to be more agile, also for rapid benchmarking of in-house technologies for the first solution. So the key is as fast as an off-the-shelf product, as an individual as the customer needs a tailor-made product. And of course, furthermore, on the other hand, strengthened customer focus to support sensitivities. Success lies in the listening to customers and developing products tailored to their needs. So deepen cultural sensitivity and geopolitical understanding. Successful supply chain management requires in-depth knowledge of markets and dynamics. So it's important to have a local development department in order to better adapt to local needs and to better understand to local characteristics. So the key is to maintain close contact with the customer at an early stage. So working in a close partnership, bringing relevant departments into the dialogue in order to exploit the potential of all new innovations. It's It's not always effective if purchasing and sales are the only ones in dialogue. R&D must be involved at an early stage too. And last but not least, of course, focus on a strong team to support innovation worldwide. Transformations can only be implemented quickly with an open mindset and engaged employees. The coming years, maybe not, will be marked by disruptions and challenges. So companies that take the right steps now will not only survive, but become market leaders in the global electrification industry.
It's a really, really great insight, Sergey. Thank you so much. Davey, let's turn to you for a second. So, we've got this tapestry of global commerce that's becoming more and more interwoven with these regulations, these compliance issues. I was particularly fascinated about the dispute resolution portion of your discussion. And of course, tariffs, the word that's on every American's mind at this moment. All these things that you talked about. How do companies best position themselves in the next 5 to 10 years to navigate those challenges? I mean, if you're talking to clients, how are you advising them today?
Well, the first thing that I advise everybody to do, and it can actually save you tons of money down the line, is to make sure you have legal counsel at all time watching those changes, because the law changes every day, and the global dynamics changes all the time, and the ones that are most up to date to these area of issues are your counsel. That's the first thing I would advise. But most importantly, it's important for adaptation. You need to adapt very, very fast. And ones who are not adapting are behind, and also to remain plugged in. So if for example, you decide to stay within your own methods, today we have artificial intelligence, AI with ChatGPT and all these things. But let's say, for example, yesterday we didn't have internet, and then all of a sudden we have internet, and people that just decided not to adapt to this, and when today they're just not working out together. And a good example, actually, it's kind of a metaphor to what's going on today. Back then, we had anybody who remembers. I mean, probably people from Europe do not know, but we have blockbusters that came back then, right? And then all of a sudden, you had Netflix. What streaming that just came around here, and Blockbuster decided not to adapt to these issues and compete with Netflix and just skip on their models. And now they're bankrupt because Netflix took over, and now you have Apple TV and you have all these streaming applications. So Blockbuster decided not to move forward with the streaming application. In fact, they had an idea back then, prior that Netflix had it, but they thought actually it would work. Same thing that happened when you had BlackBerry. BlackBerry used to, they had this technology of having the fingerprints when actually you could use it with an iPhone. Today, you use your finger to swipe and everything else. Well, BlackBerry had this idea of the technology, but they thought it wouldn't work. And today there's iPhone. BlackBerry today is a very weak in terms of product compared to iPhone. iPhone is well knowledgeable. It's overwhelming. So adaptation and competition, it's what needs to be done. There's no way around it. If you're not adapting fast, you're gonna be left behind. That's just the way that works. And again, have counsel to overlook these changes and to make sure that you're aware of these changes and make sure you're protected on who contract you enter into.
David, thanks for that. So again, I'm going to go just for a brief moment off script. Sergey, I want to come back to you because that raised a question for me, what David was talking about. So, he's suggesting an environment where we've got to be quick, we've got to be able to adapt. He's talking about it from the legal standpoint. You also mentioned this from the business development standpoint. How much, as a person working in business development, how much does your interaction with, let's say, customer A guide your discussion when you're then talking to customer B? I mean, each time you talk to a new customer in this quick changing environment, are you learning information that's helpful? Or is each customer interaction totally unique and you're having to develop totally unique solutions? Like, how cumulative is this process?
Yeah, actually, it depends on the customer. It depends on the application field of our products. It depends of the region. Actually, we have to adapt to the individual boundaries and also in the individual needs on the customer. So there is no a clear statement, a clear recipe to follow.
Mm.
You have to adapt to the framework.
Okay, understood. Olympia, let's go to you with this kind of final wrap-up question, which is again, what we should be doing for these next 5 to 10 years. I mean, you're overseeing strategic sourcing for a major player in the electrification movement. Where is your focus for the next few years? I mean, what do you think is the most important things companies should be thinking about?
Well, in the case of a global group, such as the Group, I see three big targets that I gave to my team. First of all,
Mm.
you have to work more and more closely with our suppliers, with the entire supply chain. That means improve the partnership, empower relationship at all level, at all organization and management levels, and also promote an open and transparent communication. So the market is changing, and we have to learn each other, and so communicating and facing challenges together, because today we are successful if our suppliers move forward together with us and face a challenge, supporting us. In generally speaking, as I told before, we are targeting to award more and more supplier, nevertheless, where they are located, which who shares our values, our core values, which
Mm.
are innovation, a passion for technology, a continuous improvement approach, and being customer oriented. That's my short and summarized comment, because my colleague already, other panelists touch a lot of points. So I think that is my short answer to your wrap up question.
Well, Olympia, let me add a follow-up before Paul pops back in here. You know, I know that the Zappi Group, we follow sort of this idea of in region for region manufacturing, right? From our operational standpoint. You know, given all this information that we've discussed over the last, 45 minutes or so, I mean, do you also recommend from the sourcing side to consider like in region for region sourcing? I mean, are you looking for, large suppliers who have footprints in Asia, footprints in Europe, footprints in US where they can supply directly and locally? Or do you still believe in the globalization mindset that we've had for many years, which I think you and I both have talked about personally, enjoying the kind of development of the global supply chain? So what do you really recommend? I mean, is the idea to look for local partners more attractive to you now, or bigger companies, let's say, that have multiple footprints? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that still we have to keep in mind the globalization that is not dead at all,
Mm.
and also because we have to remind that Zappi Group, in our case, we have manufacturing facilities in all regions. So we
Mhm.
need to establish local supplier for local facilities of us, and that can be also used if there is cost efficiency, and if it is valuable, can be used also for other sister company located in the other
Mm.
region. And
Understood.
also because we cannot remove one region from our mappamondo, if it is the right word in English, because electrification is a global trend, and we have potential customer or existing customer everywhere in all the region. So there are not local supplier or there are global supplier. In our group, this is the mentality. Never forget the globalization. In some cases, there are solutions that are local for local. That might be the case in some commodity. So as I told before, look at all the solution, analyze the scenario, the sourcing scenario, and prepare your strategy, adapt your strategy. And this might be that the strategy for the same commodity in one company of our group might differ from the strategy in another company located in another region, because if there are the requisite that this happen. So be adaptive also in this way.
Very, very good answer. And again, thanks to all the panelists for taking the time to let's say posit a future prediction of what we should be looking at over the next few years. With that, Paul, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, thanks very much, David. We've got a couple of good questions that have been put through in the Q&A, and I think the first one talks about asked the question about a topic that I think a lot of people have been thinking about, and that's how the proposed tariffs from the U.S. Government may affect international manufacturing and companies like Zappi Group. If US adds tariffs to specific commodities, then other countries will retaliate with other tariffs, leading to escalation. So maybe there's a question for you, Davey, and others. How real is this threat? What's real and what's just rhetoric? So who wants to take that one, Davey?
Take it, knowing about what's going on currently with the tariffs, and I want to use a hypothetical here, a situation I had with a client of mine who brought, let's say, goods from China, of course, but these goods arrived at CBP and they arrived in the U.S. territory prior to the tariffs was implemented. Problem is that they weren't cleared by the time the tariffs were implemented, so that caused an issue. And now you raise the question as to whether the tariffs should be implemented by goods that already arrived here in stock and at CBP, and whether they should not be implemented. This is actually a question that the courts has not answered at this point yet, so it's too early to say. In terms of mitigation, that's what we could do right now. It's mitigate. For example, if Zappi Group decided to manufacture in China and import in the United States, then maybe this time they should actually find some alternative routes to manufacturers and other manufacturers abroad to mitigate their costs. But there's one more thing that I want to comment about these tariffs. I don't know, and this is a question that it's very political in some aspects. I don't know if it might affect the China as much, because we have known that China has been devaluing the currency. And they do that on purpose, because the problem, what they're trying to do is that they're trying to lower the cost of labor. And then, even though you implement tariffs, then let's just devalue more our currency so we can produce more. They want to be a production base. They don't want to have big consumer base. So that could also mitigate the issues on the tariffs if China decided to further down the line devaluate the currency, and then now things get cheaper as it was before. That could change very, very quickly. It could change. So it all depends. It majorly depends on how companies will mitigate their risk. My aspect of things is always diversifying manufacturing in different countries. So like this, you have plan A, plan B, plan C, just in case.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. I think this is a good one. This is for just anyone on the panel. With the growth of electrification and electric vehicles around the world, I've heard that there could be significant shortages of related raw materials, such as electrical steel, copper, etc. Is this something that manufacturers are actively worried about?
I can dig into this answer. So rather than being worried, we are carefully monitoring the situation of few critical components or raw materials that are into our products. And yes, this goes into the basket of the risk monitoring. So we are not just monitoring our supplier portfolio, but we are monitoring also our commodity. If there are risks inside the specific commodity, which type of risk, and we are monitoring the trend. To better to avoid disruption, we have learned a lot during the recent event and some shortage that occurred after COVID, when the demand abruptly jumped, and we had some shortage, and we realized that. So lesson learned from that experience was that we really can make the difference if we have some contracts that with the critical supplier that are supplying us and critical components. So contracts can really prevent such events, that we have some priority in their allocation. So that is one solution. So saying that we are worried, no, but for sure we are carefully monitoring the evolution, and we have identified in our commodity portfolio some critical material or components that might be really get put at risk. But yes, we are aware we cannot avoid to use semiconductor in our products. We cannot avoid to use steel, magnetic steel in our motors. So that's a fact, and we are working to mitigate such risk.
Okay. All right. A question for Sergey. How much of your company's business is related to customers for the electrification industry? Has that number been growing as the trends would lead us to believe? And is it more significant in any one region, for example, Europe versus Americas versus Asia?
First of all, Paul, if you allow me to add something to what Olympia answered to the question beforehand, how we are focusing this challenge of materials shortage and related question, if you allow. We are kind of facing this challenge by trying to focus on business model innovations, especially business models driven by sustainability. That's a key, a trend, the shift from traditional linear production models, where products are manufactured, used, and discarded afterwards, to circular business models. So the shift towards remanufacturing, respectively refurbishment and circular economy principles in general, which are extending product life cycles and reducing waste. They are fundamentally changing how manufacturers approach development and production. We are now trying to design products with the modularity in mind, allowing kinda extend the lifetime, allowing for easier repair, reuse, and recycling. In order to significantly reduce material waste and costs, but also to extend the product lifetime. Maybe just an addition to that question beforehand.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We have a question about, with the current challenges that we're all faced with, putting all of the balls in one basket, it may not be the most smart strategy. So, what would a reasonable time be for having at least a few options, either local or in place worldwide? Who would like to take that one?
Olympia, you want to tackle that? Having dual source for all options?
As I answered to so many questions, that's your turn, David. You are a purchasing manager of us, so I let you answer. What is your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as the question suggests, putting all of our balls in one basket is not the right answer. And unfortunately, not all commodities fit into the same basket in this analysis as well. So certain commodities that we buy require very expensive tooling. They require a lot of development time, R&D time, and so on. And so in order to duplicate our manufacturing ability for, let's say, aluminum casting in another region, involves another investment of the tool, another investment of R&D time, another investment of quality checks and qualification, involves rounds with the customer and so on. So this can become very time consuming. It can become a big expense. And so I think, as the panelists have all mentioned, the focus here is risk monitoring, assessment, and mitigation. So in the case that you have a very risky commodity, I think you have to be willing to consider second sourcing those things. I think about one example that we all in electrification consistently think about, which is like rare earth magnets coming out of, most of those are coming out of China. So if suddenly we lost that supply chain, where would we go? So there would be very few options. So developing a second source where you can find it for something risky like that, which has a particular sensitivity in a geopolitically charged world. I think those particular commodities have to be looked at very carefully about building second sources and developing those. And to the questioner, some of those can take a few months. Some of those could take much longer to develop because of the time of creating tooling and developing suppliers and so on to be able to meet a certain need. So it's not a one size fits all answer, in my opinion. Olympia, you could certainly say if you think otherwise, but I think individually, risk assessment for each commodity, deciding whether or not there's enough risk to justify the additional investment to develop a second source. I think that's the methodology you have to use. And much like Davey suggested, maybe if I'm sourcing a new part, then I'm looking for the lowest risk place to source that. Maybe if I'm in the US, I'm not putting that in China right now while we have some threat of additional tariff and maybe a trade war and so on. So maybe I'd look somewhere else in the first sourcing, not just considering a second source. So from my perspective, risk mitigation is based on the assessment and the decision of weighing the sort of cost and the benefit of the investment needed to mitigate that risk.
Okay, we almost out of time, everyone. Perhaps we've got if some Davey, perhaps sounds like you might have answered this a little bit earlier, but if you can kind of fit this into maybe 1 or 2 minutes, then I think we'll wrap it up. But the question was around APAC, Asia Pacific, emerging as a hub for manufacturing of electrification components. Like, why do you think this region is really kind of stepping up now?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. Why do you think APAC is emerging as a hub for manufacturing electrification components?
So, well, APAC countries have a model already for manufacturing. And we're talking about China has been focused only to reduce exports. That's what they were actually within that model. So in countries like China have developed highly integrated manufacturing system. These systems allow efficient productions. They have raw materials. They have the labor costs. Labor cost is very cheap compared to many countries out there. So they're more in that competitive aspect. And that's what they want to do. They want to mass produce and export as much as they can, so they can actually gain the wealth out of it. And it actually, what happened is that a lot of countries will be dependent on these countries, because if you go to Vietnam, if you go to China, or if you go to these, or even India, they're a lot cheaper. So what would happen is that, basically speaking, we're dependent on these countries to manufacture goods because of the cost, and they are designed this way. That's intentional. That's really intentional, the way how they're designed. However, there's also a way of disputes on the political aspects, such as, when you import goods, you lose jobs in the country, but if you export goods from the country, then you make jobs for the country, right? So there's a lot of downfalls and playfulls on how it can work out. But most of the time, that's because these countries are designed for manufacturing.
Okay. All right, guys, we are out of time, but a big thanks to all the folks on the call presenting, panelists. Really appreciate it. For everybody in the audience, we hope you found the session to be educational and insightful. All our sessions will be recorded and distributed to all the registrants once the conference has concluded. So thank you so much to everyone for tuning in, being part of our conference here. And we hope that you can stay and join us for another session, and please visit the lobby to see what the next session is. So thanks very much, and have a great day, everyone.